The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and refuses to let you breathe. Alex stepped through the front door, the familiar scent of cedar and old books mingling with the faint, lingering trace of his mother's perfume. The emptiness of the house hit him harder than the hospital's sterile corridors ever could. His mother, Emily, was gone. Gone forever, and in her absence, the walls felt colder, darker, as though mourning her too. "Alex," came a voice, sharp and cold. Michael, his father, leaned against the doorway to the living room, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You're home late, again." Alex's heart sank. He had been away for hours, sorting out his mother's things, trying to make sense of a grief that refused to be tamed. I was at the hospital, Dad. I had to." Michael cut him off with a dismissive wave. "I don't want excuses. You need to learn responsibility." His eyes were hard, unyielding. "And I think it's time you learned what it means to fend for yourself." Alex froze. Something in his chest twisted. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Michael said slowly, savoring the words as if they were venom, "that it's time for you to leave tonight. Pack your things." The words landed like blows. Alex's mouth went dry. "You're kicking me out," he whispered, unable to believe it. "Yes," Michael said, his voice flat and final. "You're not my responsibility anymore. Grief doesn't give you a free pass to mope around here. You need to grow up." Alex felt the air escape him in a long, shuddering sigh. He opened his mouth, tried to argue, to plead, but no words could undo the finality in his father's gaze. The man who should have been his protector, his anchor in the storm of loss, had abandoned him. He walked through the house, trailing his fingers along the furniture as if saying goodbye to pieces of a life that was slipping away. Every photograph of his mother made his chest ache. She had always been the warmth and the cold, the voice that softened the sharp edges of his father's temper. Now she was gone, and Michael's cruelty filled the space she left behind. At the top of the stairs, Alex paused. That's when he noticed a small envelope tucked behind the family photo of his parents on the mantel. His mother's handwriting, delicate and familiar, stared back at him. His hands trembled as he opened it. "For Alex, if I am gone before him." Inside was a folded sheet of paper, neat and precise, a will, her final words to him, carefully written, meant to protect him, to guide him, even in death. He skimmed it, eyes widening, as he realized it wasn't just a list of possessions or bank accounts. His mother had planned for him, shielded him, ensured that Michael could never control what was hers to give him. A spark ignited in Alex's chest, not the burning, reckless anger he had felt when his father shouted, but something quieter, steadier, something sharp and determined. For the first time since her death, he felt not just grief, but purpose. The betrayal cut deep, yes, but it also revealed a path forward, one he had never considered. Michael didn't know the full extent of Emily's foresight, didn't know that she had thought of every loophole, every contingency, every way to protect her son from men like him. Alex stuffed the letter into his coat pocket and turned toward the door. Outside, rain began to fall, heavy and unrelenting, soaking his hair and clothes. Yet he welcomed it. The cold rain washed away some of the despair, leaving a raw, burning clarity. He would survive this. He would reclaim what was rightfully his. And in the quiet, simmering shadows of his grief, a plan began to form. Michael may have kicked him out, but he had underestimated Alex. And most importantly, he had underestimated Emily. And that would be his greatest mistake. The streets were merciless. Alex trudged through puddles that reflected the neon glare of passing cars, the chill of the evening biting through his thin jacket. The world had not stopped moving because he had lost his mother. People hurried past, oblivious to his pain, and for the first time, he truly felt invisible. He was homeless, abandoned, and yet strangely alive. He had no one to turn to. Michael's words echoed in his mind, cold and final, "You're not my responsibility anymore." But his mother's letter burned in his coat pocket, a small lifeline, a reminder that he wasn't completely powerless. That night, Alex found shelter in the corner of a dimly lit cafe, quietly sipping a cheap cup of coffee. He unfolded the letter again, staring at the careful handwriting, at the precise instructions Emily had left for him. Each word felt like a gentle hand on his shoulder, guiding him even from beyond the grave. Alex, if you ever find yourself in need, know that I have taken care of you. Your father must not have access to what I leave behind. It is yours, but only with patience and wisdom can you claim it. Alex's hands trembled. He read the words again and again, searching for hidden meaning. He knew his mother had always been clever, and now he understood why. The will wasn't just a list of her assets. It was a roadmap, a shield against Michael's greed and arrogance. He knew what he had to do. First, he needed the official documents. The thought of confronting the cold bureaucracy made him uneasy, but there was no choice. He borrowed a public library computer, his fingers trembling as he navigated the online portal for the county's probate office. After hours of searching, he found it, the scanned copy of Emily's will. Alex sank into the chair, his eyes scanning the text. His mother had hidden clauses, instructions buried deep within legal jargon. A trust had been set up in his name. Assets, property, and even the family home, all under Alex's control, but only if he claimed them. Michael would have no legal authority. Not a shred, not a word. A mix of anger and exhilaration surged through him. All this time, Michael had believed himself in control, convinced that he had the upper hand. Yet, in his blind arrogance, he had never even opened the documents. He had underestimated Emily. He had underestimated Alex. The realization was intoxicating. Alex allowed himself a small smile, bitter but satisfied. For the first time since his mother's death, he felt the sting of betrayal soften, replaced by the sharp edge of possibility. He could take what was rightfully his, and in doing so, show Michael the consequences of cruelty. But Alex also understood something else. This wasn't about destruction. This was about justice. Michael's downfall wouldn't come from rage or malice, but from the careful unraveling of his own mistakes. Alex had to be patient. The trust, the property, the financial leverage, they were all pieces of a puzzle, and he would place them with precision. That night, as he curled up under a tattered blanket in the quiet corner of the cafe, Alex made a silent promise to himself. He would honor his mother's wishes. He would reclaim his life, and he would make sure that Michael, who had abandoned him in his moment of grief, understood the consequences of his arrogance. The storm outside had not abated, but Alex welcomed it. The rain was no longer cold, it was cleansing. Every droplet seemed to wash away the helplessness, leaving clarity, resolve, and the faint, thrilling taste of revenge. Tomorrow he would begin. The first step would be careful, almost invisible. But with each step, Michael's empire of control would crumble, not through violence, but through foresight, patience, and the quiet, relentless determination of a son who had learned that sometimes the sweetest revenge is the one delivered without malice, only justice. And Alex, for the first time in weeks, allowed himself to believe that he could win. Alex stepped into the world with a quiet purpose. The streets no longer felt like chains, they felt like a proving ground. Each day he walked past the house he had once called home. He imagined Michael inside, oblivious to the storm brewing outside. An invisible reckoning he was preparing with patience and precision. The first step was subtle. Alex contacted his mother's lawyer, an elderly man named Mr. Whittaker, who had always admired Emily's intelligence and foresight. Alex had nothing to lose and everything to gain by trusting him. Together, they reviewed the intricate details of the trust Emily had established. The clauses were clever: funds released in installments to Alex, properties secured in his name, and stipulations that kept Michael completely powerless unless Alex chose otherwise. With each clause Alex uncovered, a small thrill coursed through him. Michael's arrogance had always been his greatest weakness. He had never bothered to read the fine print, never questioned Emily's decisions, and assumed his authority was absolute. That mistake would cost him everything. Alex's first move was invisible. He ensured the trust was fully activated under his control, quietly transferring assets and securing properties. Michael remained blissfully unaware, bragging to neighbors and colleagues about the control he thought he held over the family's estate. He had no idea that the legal foundation of his world had already shifted beneath him. Next, Alex began to weave a network of quiet allies. Former family friends, neighbors, even Michael's colleagues, those who had respected Emily and seen her fairness, were subtly reminded of her wishes. Alex never demanded loyalty, never raised his voice. He simply shared small truths, anecdotes, and the quiet knowledge that Michael had been reckless, unjust, and blind. Slowly, people began to distance themselves from Michael, whether through professional caution or social disapproval. And then came the subtle financial maneuvers. Alex redirected minor accounts, transferred ownerships of small properties, and ensured that Michael's access to funds was restricted without raising alarms. Every action was precise, legal, and silent, a shadow weaving through the life his father had taken for granted. Michael, as always, remained oblivious. He raged at trivial inconveniences, blaming luck, bureaucracy, or imagined enemies, never suspecting that the boy he had cast aside was orchestrating it all. But Alex's revenge was not cruelty. It was satisfaction rooted in justice. The kind his mother had always taught him was the strongest. He never humiliated Michael publicly, never shouted or threatened. Instead, he let the consequences build naturally, like water wearing away stone. Michael's frustration grew, his control slipped, and the arrogance that had defined him began to crack. In quieter moments, Alex allowed himself small smiles of vindication. He thought of his mother, her eyes twinkling with quiet pride, knowing that her son was taking the lessons she had imparted to him seriously. He remembered her voice, gentle but firm. Patience and wisdom will protect you far more than anger ever could. Every calculated step he took, every minor victory, felt like carrying her legacy forward. Yet beneath the calm, there was a fire. A need for Michael to recognize, finally, the depth of his mistakes, not to destroy him, not to inflict suffering, but to make him confront the consequences of his own arrogance. Alex imagined that day vividly, the day Michael would finally see that the power he had believed he held was an illusion, and that the son he had cast aside was the one who held the true strength. As he returned to his modest apartment that night, Alex looked out at the city lights glimmering through the rain. The world seemed quiet, obedient to his plan, and for the first time since his mother's death, he felt the thrill of control. Not over people, but over his destiny. Michael had underestimated him, and under the shadows of grief, under the rain of loss, Alex smiled. The sweet revenge had only just begun. The day Alex had imagined for weeks finally arrived. Michael paced in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, voice rising and falling with frustration. Documents that he thought were secure, money he assumed was untouchable, and the reputation he had built with arrogance were all quietly slipping through his fingers. And yet he still didn't know the reason. Alex entered the house, not with fury, not with a shout, but with the calm certainty of someone who had already won. His footsteps were steady, almost imperceptible, but each one carried the weight of months of planning, patience, and quiet revenge. Michael's head snapped up, confusion flashing across his face, quickly replaced by irritation. "Alex," he barked. "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be a dad," Alex said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm here to show you something." He held out the envelope, Emily's handwriting on the seal, fragile but unmistakable. Michael snatched it, tearing it open in a mixture of curiosity and defensiveness. He skimmed the pages, and with each word, his face grew paler. Clauses he hadn't noticed, trusts he hadn't questioned, and legal restrictions he had ignored all stared back at him. The arrogance he had carried like armor melted away. You can't do this," Michael said, his voice cracking. I thought you were in control," Alex said softly. "You thought Mom's estate was yours to command, but she protected me, and she knew you wouldn't do the right thing." Michael sank into the couch, defeated, fumbling for words that didn't exist. Alex watched silently, not savoring the destruction of his father, but witnessing the inevitable consequences of his choices. The man who had kicked him out, abandoned him in grief, and believed himself untouchable, was finally forced to confront reality. Alex felt a strange mixture of emotions: sorrow for the father who had once been his protector, anger for the betrayal, and satisfaction for the justice his mother had ensured. He didn't need Michael to apologize. He didn't need him to beg. The clarity of victory, earned through patience, foresight, and the love of his mother, was enough. "Everything she left me is mine," Alex said quietly. "The house, the accounts, the trust. It's all hers to give, and she gave it to me." Michael looked up, tears welling in his eyes, not of sorrow for loss, but of shame. I never realized," he whispered. "I was wrong. You never realized because you refused to listen," Alex interrupted gently. "You never thought about anyone but yourself. But it's okay. It's done now. You have a choice. Learn from this, or continue living in regret." Alex turned and walked toward the door, stopping briefly to look at the family portraits on the wall, the mother he had lost, the father who had failed him, and himself, finally standing tall, no longer a victim of either. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds. It felt like the world itself was acknowledging a new beginning. He walked to his mother's grave that afternoon, carrying her favorite flowers. Kneeling, he whispered, "I did what you wanted, Mom. I protected myself, I honored you, and I'll carry your wisdom with me always." For the first time since her death, Alex felt peace. The grief was still there, deep and raw, but it no longer weighed him down. He had survived betrayal, reclaimed his life, and done so without losing himself in anger. As he stood and brushed his hands on his jeans, he looked toward the horizon, the city bathed in golden light. Life was waiting, full of challenges and opportunities, but now he faced it with strength, guided by love and tempered by patience. Michael would remember this day, the consequences of his arrogance, and the quiet, devastating power of a mother's foresight and a son's resilience. And Alex, for the first time in months, smiled not with vengeance, but with the serene satisfaction of someone who had endured, learned, and finally triumphed. The past could not hurt him anymore. The future, however, was entirely his.